Welcome back to this special discussion on the ANC nominations process. Now, on Friday, the ANC's second biggest province opted to endorse an unnamed candidate for president. Mpumalanga is seemingly refusing to choose between Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa. Well, the chairperson there in Mpumalanga had this to say when reporters questioned him about this unity slate on Friday.
In the province, people want unity.
Who is unity? Is it Zweli Mkhize?
I told you that it's a consensus leadership.
Can you allow the Premier to respond, colleagues? Not interject.
Consensus leadership.
Are you saying
consensus leadership?
Double deputy president?
Consensus leadership.
All right. I want to open with you, Mr. Sarakinski. So, consensus leadership. Essentially here, what David Mabuza is asking for is that there be no contest in this particular race. Is that possible to even talk about?
At this stage, it's unlikely, but as the caucusing heats up, as the electoral conference looms, and in Nasrec, when the delegates are there, something might emerge along those lines. But at this stage, it seems unlikely.
Your view?
Look, this is, for me, it's a failure of leadership and succession management. I think if the leadership of the ANC had worked on leadership, succession and management over time, by now there are strong possibilities that they could be going to the conference possibly with one candidate. But you can't say in the heat of an elective mood that, let's have consensus. Because now you are no longer choosing a leader based on the capacities and abilities of that particular leader. You are saying that to avoid a problem, let's have consensus. And that's not leadership, it's crisis management. So there's no such thing as a consensus person in the absence of leadership, succession plan and management.
So the two of you are completely dismissing, therefore, this possibility that the ANC could come out with almost an arranged leadership, if you like, to avoid a bitter contest. The next question, therefore, becomes, would we possibly see a leadership that emerges there that is without the two frontrunners? Are we likely to see any other candidate emerge as a result of the pressure from Mpumalanga, because they have a huge bargaining power going into that conference, as David Mabuza himself says?
Well, I remember at the beginning I said I don't buy into this Mpumalanga being the queen maker, in this process. So I still think one of the two are going to emerge. I don't foresee the scenario that you are painting. But there's also this issue, the fact that one of the things that the ANC prides itself, which is very good, it's internal democracy. And choosing a candidate to lead the ANC, it's a hardcore part and process of that leadership, internal democracy of the ANC, which it has sustained itself, over time. And if they really want to come up with a predetermined person to lead the ANC, they can't do that in the heat of the elective process. It has to be something that is done over a lengthy period of time as part of succession that says, in the next 20 years, this is the type of the ANC that they want to produce, and therefore they are going to embark on this leadership type of a process.
Mr. Sarakinski, let's decode David Mabuza, therefore. If the two of you are agreed that you're either going to have Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma or Cyril Ramaphosa becoming president, is the better devil, therefore, in the eyes of David Mabuza, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, because he also happens to be the running mate every time a province nominates her? He is the automatic deputy, at least for now. That's how things are looking. We're not sure how KZN is going to decide in the next few days. But are we decoding him correctly when we are thinking along those lines?
I think that's part of it. I think he's keeping his options much more open than that. So he is appearing on the same slate in terms of the outcome so far with Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. But I think he also is aware that there's no guarantee that she will win. And that means if she doesn't win, and he is so closely aligned to her, his political future is bleak. So I think he's bringing in this unity candidate to give himself some independent bargaining power. So it was 100 and something for Cyril Ramaphosa, 7 or so more for, so marginal difference between the two, and then the bulk, this unity candidate. And I think what he's trying to do is use that. It's a poker game, and he's using those unity candidate votes as chips to try and bargain, intimidate, bluff any of the other players into bringing him on board should it become apparent that she's not going to win. He also has been aligned to Zweli Mkhize, who has stood on a third-party candidate. So he's really, really engaging in a whole range of possibilities in terms of his political future.
What are we to make of the efforts of the current leadership? I think in the main, President Jacob Zuma, whom we're told convened not just a meeting of the candidates, but also the provincial chairpersons and secretaries. Is it a little too late, as everybody seems to be reporting as such, or does he have a chance? And what could he be looking for out of this?
The so-called Last Supper.
The so-called Last Supper.
Look, I think for me, you're right. It's a little bit too late. You, as a president, you don't come up and endorse one candidate and somewhere down the line and say, let's talk unity. I think he has missed the boat of being the statesman, you know, being this overarching person that oversees and that all the factions in the ANC could, you know, identify with. And by the way, just to add a little bit, that's actually the problem of the ANC by and large. It is dominated by your hardliners, your extremists, that is either this position or not. Now, the moderates are they are not influential. But then the biggest gap is this one of a statesmanship. That, you know, so you don't have that. So, and this is why when the president on the eve of an election says, no, let's come together and talk unity, he can't be trusted with that because he has not been playing the role of a statesman for a very long time. He has, you know, identified his preferred candidate, and some might even assume that is by calling all of these people into the same room, he's actually paving the way for his preferred candidate. So I don't think he's in a position to play that unifying role at this 11th hour of the elective conference.
The talk right now, Mr. Sarakinski, is that inside that NEC meeting that is taking place, which somewhat coincided with the Provincial General Council of Gauteng also taking place at this weekend, there is serious horse trading going on. Provincial leaders are lobbying each other, and there's talk that Gauteng is also possibly going to try and nudge not just Mpumalanga but other provinces as well. What result are we likely to see out of these efforts? Because it would seem to me that Mpumalanga is going to be the province to target by all these other by all these other provinces. So what kind of result are we likely, or can we anticipate, coming out of those discussions?
It's unpredictable and very difficult to read, because just because the premiers or the provincial party chairs are having negotiations and reaching agreements doesn't mean that they can get the branches and the delegates from the branches to march in step to the agreements that they have reached. At the end of the day, it's the branch delegates who are going to vote at the electoral conference, and it's going to be very, very difficult for the provincial leaders to keep everyone in line. And if it's a secret ballot, it's going to be even harder for the provincial leaders to keep everyone in line. So they're going to try their best, they're going to cajole, they're going to threaten, they're going to bribe, they're going to throw money to try and get the delegates in their provinces to follow suit. But there's no guarantee that they will. And that's where it becomes open-ended and unpredictable. And that's a good thing.
Are we likely to see, Mr. Hlophe, people voting against their branch mandates at that conference if, for example, we imagine for a second that the Free State delegates go to that conference on their own, not being shepherded by the provincial leadership?
Yeah.
If you also look at KZN, if that leadership is told, get out of the office, you actually no longer exist. And there's another province, a big, massive province, that carries the biggest numbers there to that conference. Are we likely to see people actually using what I think has been the talk in Parliament for the longest time, using their conscience? Or are they going to vote in accordance with who's greased their hands better than the other?
Okay. Bringing back the conscience issue. now, two things. The immediate answer for me is yes. It is highly possible that, the delegates might decide when they get into that voting booth to decide otherwise. When Big Brother, is not necessarily watching. So it is possible. Next to that, there's a lot of lobbying and greasing of hands and all of these things at the actual conference itself. And then things can change. One good example, there was this Gauteng provincial elective conference where Paul Mashatile contested against Angie Motshekga. And going into that conference, the numbers were in favor of Angie Motshekga. But there was some serious lobbying at Galaga Estate at the actual conference, and then Paul Mashatile actually emerged victorious. So things might change. But just to add one thing in terms of this chairpersons, they are negotiating and horse trading and all of that. The difficulty at this point in time to do these negotiations is that they agree until they get to a point that says who should be then this #1 candidate. Now, each and every grouping once agrees to what the other camp is saying on condition that their preferred candidate is the candidate that they are taking into the... So because they have got different candidates, they can agree on a whole lot of things, but that alone, it is going to stop them from reaching an overarching consensus.
The element we've not touched on at all, Mr. Sarakinski, is the leagues of the ANC. Yes. The two of them have come out publicly and endorsed Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. How much weight do they have or do they add to this? And will they, lead to her possibly increasing her chances?
Women's League's got 25 votes. The Youth League's got another 25 votes. The Veterans have 25 votes, 75 votes out of over 5,000 votes. So I think that the leagues aren't going to be king or queen makers. I think that whoever wins is going to win for a whole range of other reasons, and I don't think that they will be significant players.
All right. As we taper down on this discussion, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to put your head on the block.
It's a big head.
You tell me, who between these two front runners stands a better chance based on the outcomes of nominations that we've seen? Of course, the nominations are just that, nominations. It may not necessarily translate to the actual vote, but who is standing a better chance at the moment?
Let me answer differently. The faction that is going to play clever than the other will have its candidate win.
And what does clever mean?
Clever means maneuvering, cheating there and there, all of these things that are usually not seen above the surface. The faction that is going to play those clever, underhanded issues better than the other will have its candidate win.
Mr. Sarakinski?
I'm trying to be a bit clearer in terms of a view on who's going to come through. And it's quite difficult because as soon as you express a view, you're seen as factional. The merits, the candidature, the issues are now so far less important than A or B or C. So it's quite risky to actually answer your question honestly, because you get pushed into a camp and everything that you've said is reinterpreted in terms of your alleged factional politics thereafter.
Surely you're not part of any faction in the ANC.
No, but you could possibly be accused of being aligned to or a propagandist of a faction, and I'm sure the Twitterati are going crazy watching us deliberate on these issues already. So I would answer it along the same vein, but without giving a name, because it is very difficult to say yes or no. There's too much we don't know at this point in time, and that's my honest view. But I think that the winner is going to be the outcome of a process that is unsavory in its nature. I don't think it's going to be a clean process. We've seen at provincial level across many provinces terrible politics, and I think that this is just going to get worse as time goes on.
Possible collapse of the conference?
The possible collapse of the conference.
We've talked about it many times.
Yeah, it's not
Is
in
there
the
a real possibility of that, given the developments that are going on?
Given these endless court cases that are going on, number one, which indicates that the current leadership is unable to manage the factions in the and by the way, factions are not a problem. It's the inability to manage their differences that is the problem. So it comes back to the leadership. So if the leadership is unable to deal with these matters, there is that possibility. But if the conference collapses because some audits are not clear, the process was manipulated, it will not bode well for the current leadership. There could be conspiracy theories that they masterminded the collapse of. So it's in the best interest of the current leadership to make sure that the conference doesn't collapse.
You have 40 seconds, Mr. Sarakinski. Quick question. If it doesn't collapse, it produces a result, will it possibly be contested? Are conditions right now, are the maneuverings that you're seeing right now possibly leading you to that thought that the one faction that loses may actually go to court?
The losing faction may well go to court. The losing faction may even split from the ANC. It's as intense as that, I think, in terms of where we are at the moment.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. You really have been great at your insights. Thank you very much for having joined us here. Dumisani Hlophe, thank you very much indeed, and Ivor Sarakinski. And that has been the special discussion on the roundup of the ANC nominations process. And of course, we know that two provinces still remain, and they have yet to pronounce on who their preferred candidate is going to be, and that is Limpopo and the province of KwaZulu-Natal. That province watched very closely, and we are reliably informed indeed, in fact, that there is possibly going to be a result or an outcome sometime this week from those two provinces. So we're going to watch those results very closely as they come through. Thank you very much for having joined us, and this comes to an official end, this special discussion.